This is an equal sum line. What the blazes? I attempted to pause the video while a girlfriend cry. This is it's ludicrous. I've got no clue how we can possibly solve this. That is absurd. So literally, it's a Sudoku made up of a line. That's mental. That is absolutely mental. Let me say for the record, before I even attempt this, this is one of the greatest Sudoku creations in the history of Sudoku. It's a Sudoku made up of a line. It's so stupid. It's so stupid. And now I've got to solve it.
Got it. Okay. That's very cool. I need to pick either 2 odds or 2 evens. I really like that. That's very cute.
Oh, this is just wonderful. This is just wonderful. By Mad Geometry and Jay Dyer. This is ridiculous. Of course. Oh my goodness me. I think I've just wasted everyone's... Oh no. I have a feeling the colour has just drained from my face, which is ironic. Of course. No, you can't. I've got it. You can't put a black cell in a 3x3 box now because it's 15.
Hello everyone. We are live. Welcome Adam and Andrew and David and Nevaria. And welcome Jay Dyer. In person this time. Well, sort of in person. How are you doing today, Jay?
I'm doing fine.
Perfect. All right, let's just get rolling. So, her creativity is astounding and her humor is unmatched. This constructor has been featured 9 times on CTC, all of which are brilliant examples of her work. She is the inventor of the deconstruction variant and discovered the Sudoku X ring theorem. Please welcome Jay Dyer.
Hello.
All right, just like last time, we're gonna do some warm-up questions that are less puzzle related than the rest of the talk, featured or sponsored by our wonderful patrons whose names are all on the screen right now. First of all, let's go with where do you currently live?
I'm in
country?
Edinburgh.
Edinburgh, that's in England, right?
Scotland.
Oh, Scotland. Okay, cool. Yes.
I'm originally from England, but
I see. I'm very as we ask more questions that are not puzzle related, everyone realizes how uncultured I am to not know film directors or where Edinburgh is, or etc. etc. So speaking of film directors, do you have a favorite movie or a favorite kind of movie?
I'm quite partial to sci-fi, some action movies. So some my favorites, I'd probably go for Apollo 13.
Nice, that's a good one.
I also quite enjoy animation movies, and Kung Fu Panda trilogy is another sort of what I'll usually watch if I want to relax in an evening, sort of thing.
Fair. Do you watch any TV? Do you have a favorite TV show?
I don't watch a huge amount these days. Stargate is probably sort of the big one that I followed, but haven't been watching so many things recently, just not for any particular reason.
Yeah. Favorite kind of music or artist?
I tend to go for classical music or film soundtracks.
Nice. Those are always good to relax. What do you do for work?
Computer programming and a bit of science research.
Nice. Nice. Uh, do you have any hobbies or interests outside of puzzling?
Ooh. Um, puzzling has kind of become my all-consuming hobby
Yeah,
recently, but I enjoy programming as a hobby as well. Had a few forays into game development sorts of things.
nice. Speaking of puzzling being this all-consuming thing, how do you balance puzzling with other things in your life?
Badly.
Badly, yeah. Same, that's why I'm here, so. Are you more of an inside person or an outside person?
Inside, I guess.
Yeah,
I
that's
I
fair.
like I like mountain climbing and things like that, but I'm indoors most of the time.
I like how you casually. I like mountain climbing, but whatever. uh, Mountain climbing usually pretty impressive, right? um, do you have any pets other than the stuffed tiger behind you?
No, I don't.
Are you more of a cat or a dog person if you had to choose?
Cat.
Nice. Right, because your Discord, what is it called? Status, I guess, is pretending to be a cat.
Pretending to be a cat. Yeah.
Yeah.
The reason for that in my avatar is because the first thing I used Discord for was an Elder Scrolls Online server, and I play a cat person in any video game that will allow me to.
Nice.
So I'm a Khajiit in that.
Uh, are you a big video game person? Do you play a lot of video games?
Yeah, fair amount.
Nice. Oh, my word. Sorry, just hit something on my desk. It went spinning like crazy. Okay. All right, let's get into the puzzle setting part of this. I will remove the patrons and see the glorious background of all the puzzles that you've created. What was the first puzzle that you ever set, or maybe the first? What were the first few puzzles you ever set?
Yeah, well, the first puzzle I set is it's lost to the ages. I didn't do much with it. I didn't keep any records of what it was. So I tried looking it up so I could show it, but couldn't find it. But it was rather unusually for me. It was a puzzle where all of the clues were givens, and it was some kind of rule set that I made up where like well it was Sudoku, but there was like a every digit had to be adjacent to at least one digit that was consecutive with it, something along those lines. I can't remember exactly, and I
Hmm.
did come up with some logic that I quite liked in it, but was kind of yeah, I hadn't got into the CTC Discord yet and didn't really have anything to do with it, so it just sort of disappears. But then by the time I made my second puzzle, I was on the CTC Discord, so I posted it in testing there and on Logic Masters and stuff, and so that's actually there. It's a Whirlpool, which is it's a killer palindrome puzzle. Which again, I had to go at like making the rule set a bit custom because it's like you're not told where the ends of the palindrome are, and there's this thing where digits aren't allowed to repeat on the palindrome except to the extent that they need to. But that's actually kind of put me off doing custom rules for a while because I've had so much difficulty coming up with a wording for that rule that I thought was clear. So most of my next few puzzles after that were entirely standard constraints.
Interesting. Did you ever go back and do anything with that consecutive global constraint idea, or was it sort of just?
Uh, No,
eh,
I kind of just forgot about it, and I'm not entirely sure what I can remember for certain what it was, but I sometimes wonder about trying something like that again, but as haven't been particularly pushed to.
what sort of inspired you to set your first few puzzles?
Well, I'm probably not the first person to say this, but cracking the cryptic.
Yeah.
I stumbled across the channel while watching just random videos about lots of things, and was surprised to find out like how much variation there was in like Sudoku rule sets and the types of logic that people were managing to put into it. And I watched a number of videos, solved a few of the puzzles. I think the first one I solved was a RAF Sudoku by, I can't remember the author, but then the thing that actually motivated me to start setting was Simon and his Scrabble bags. The first time I watched the video where the Fistamafel ring was used and proved, and like it went from like it kind of just the idea of all of the logic and structure and the ways you can do these sorts of massive interconnections across the grid and things like that. It kind of clicked, and I thought I want to do something with this. I want to give it a try. So that's what I did. And if you look at quite a few of the puzzles on my early puzzles on Logic Masters, you will see that I did quite a lot with the Fistamafel ring. Yeah, you mentioned the X ring theorem, which I made a few puzzles using, but eventually I decided to try and like broaden my net and try other things that didn't involve sets and didn't involve quite so obvious geometry, which in fact, now I think about it, I was kind of motivated to shift away from doing Fistamafel ring stuff by Fistamafel again, by seeing, like, going from just hearing the name in relation to that to seeing his puzzles and solving them, and like seeing none of them use the Fistamafel ring and they're all different. And it's like, yeah, I should try different things as well.
Cool. Along those lines, you say that you're really interested in the Scrabble bags, but did you use many set relationships that weren't just sort of either Fistamafel or variations of that?
For the most of my early set stuff was primarily the Fistamafel ring. It took a while for me to come up. I have done some non-Fistamafel set stuff, but it was a while before I think I came up with an idea with one that I was particularly pleased with. I'm not entirely sure what would be the best first example of that. And actually, if I start listing some of the puzzles, I could give an example of a different set one, but by doing that, I kind of be giving a spoiler about the puzzle, so I might just leave that for people to discover. But I do have a few other sets in my puzzle list. But yeah, it's. I remember there's the quote from, I think it was Mark who said it, that was when Fistamafel makes a puzzle, he picks a rule set and makes the puzzle in that rule set. And I kind of, when I've been experimenting with sets, the Fistamafel ring has kind of always felt like the set to me. It feels like there's a remarkable amount of power in it because of the just the peculiarity of its geometry, the way you've got sort of a ring and then corner boxes. They're just so different from each other, but they're linked together, and it's just, yes. I can, I mean, people often talk in rather negative terms about sets, and I can entirely understand the sort of getting set fatigue from seeing it so much, but I mean, yeah, I've done a lot with it because I found a lot to do with it, I guess I would say.
Yeah. So how long did it take from sort of your first setting experience to get a CTC feature?
Not incredibly long, I don't think. Like, my first featured puzzle is my fourth on Logic Masters. But it wasn't the fourth puzzle I set. There were a few others that I didn't publish, but I think most of them got onto testing, but not onto Logic Masters. Yeah, it's so that was my first feature, and it was the first one I had sent in as well.
Right. And this one is pretty wild. I think this is the one where you use if I'm yes, you use multiple variations of the Fistmafell ring, which is quite a novel idea of an old sort of hat idea. Um, did you go into setting quorum rings thinking, I really want to do something where you get to use more than one Fistafel ring, or did it just sort of happen?
Um, well, so the initial idea for the diagonal theorem trick, that kind of just happened, but not on quorum rings. It actually it's happened by accident while I was setting another puzzle, but one which I actually then published a bit after quorum rings once the trick had become a bit more familiar. But
Right.
after seeing that trick and thinking about it and realizing the fact that it could apply to multiple rings, part of the reason I made the quorum rings puzzle was because I was thinking, oh, it can apply to multiple rings. I want to see if I can make that work in one puzzle at the same time. So it was, yeah, that was definitely a deliberate aim there.
Now it's really interesting because when you just say like I want to make that work in just one puzzle, I have the same thought that I have when I see most of your puzzle actually is that I'm astounded that it's even possible to set something up like that. When you start setting something like Jormunger, is that the correct?
Jormungandr.
Jormungandr, okay. I was pronouncing it wrong in my head for a long time. Jormungandr, yeah, that makes more sense actually. That's phonetically correct. Did you even like sort of
Yeah.
consider that these things would be possible, or were you just like, I mean, it's probably not possible, but maybe I can try to do it? Or did you just think like it's got to be possible for you to create this thing out of one line, or it's got to be possible to use multiple Fitzgerald rings in one puzzle with this diagonal constraint, or it's got to be possible to color an entire grid with 4 colors, and then that solves the chaos constraint. Like these are ideas that I'm astounded that they even work, really.
Yeah, it's well, so like with some of them, it's a case of I want to find out if it's possible. So like that's with the case with quorum rings. I wanted to, yeah, see if it was possible. So I started with the idea and then experimented trying to find ways of setting it up and just seeing what would work. The Jormungandr was a bit different, I guess, in that like the first stage of setting that one, it was quite a while before I actually put pen to paper, as it were, and started thinking about where to place clues. It was mostly thinking through. Like I had the idea. It was well, it would. I mean, I partly got the idea because I watched it was The River by Woofer and Jacob was featured on Cracking the Cryptic, and I watched it, and I was at a phase where basically every time I saw an idea, I was like, would this work in the deconstruction? So I just started thinking through what the interactions would be between the deconstruction rule set and a long region sum line, and just sort of figuring out all of the logic that resulted from that. And the first stage of the setting process was basically an exact mirror of the process you see Simon going through while reasoning all this out and figuring out how to use the clues. So by the time I got to actually setting Jormungandr, actually I had a fairly good idea of that it would be possible because I could see how to use the clues to force the regions, and then once you got that it becomes a much more standard type of puzzle. kind
Yeah,
of basically just to kill a puzzle once you know where the regions are.
exactly.
So so it was still a fair amount of experimentation to work out how to use those tricks to actually force a working puzzle, but I had the idea a lot clearer in my head when I started that one.
Right. So you just sort of talked through two different types of setting processes. What is your setting process like these days? Is there one setting process, or do you have several different sorts of processes? Or does it depend on the puzzle?
It depends on the puzzle, because there are a few different genres of puzzle, I guess, that feel most of my puzzles could be put into one or the other of. There are these sorts of I guess the break-in puzzles where there's a big structure with a lot of interconnected clues, and the process of getting the puzzle going is figuring out how all of these interact with each other and what they force, and then kind of just sort of doing Sudoku from there. In which case, the process of setting it is, well, the focus is very much on figuring out how to get the break-in to work. So there's a lot of playing around with different configurations. So you spend a lot of time just iterating on the start. And then once you've got that, it's just finding some additional disambiguator clues to finish it off, essentially. But then there are other puzzles where it isn't so much about one big step. It's about the first part of the puzzle is often figuring out what logic the puzzle is based on. Like if it's a doubler puzzle with a particular clue type, so you start off by thinking about how the doublers interact with that clue type, and then it's just, once you have that, the process is multiple steps, and each step is using a bit of logic that arises from that interaction. And with puzzles like that, the setting process is quite similar in that I think for a bit about how the things interact, and then find something that I can place to force something with that interaction, look at what that produces, find something else I can place to move it forward, and so on. So it's a much more multi-step process, and yeah. Yeah.
So with the break-in type puzzles, you said you iterate on the break-in. Does that mean that you're adjusting things once you have the idea, or are you trying to represent that idea in a different way so that you can get a different restriction on the grid? Is that, what do you mean by that? Is that what I'm asking?
I guess it's not sure what to say.
It's okay.
Yeah, it's
So the difference between the break-in and the more multi-step process, I guess that would be sort of a global versus local deduction as like the first step or the first few steps. Is there one of those two that you prefer over the other, or is it sort of a toss-up?
I think there isn't particularly one that I prefer over the other. I tended towards doing global deductions, and like that tended to be what I particularly wanted to do in early puzzles, but started
Because it's set, right?
thinking more about local deductions as it went on, and I'm not sure there's particularly one that I prefer over the other, because it's I mean, different puzzle ideas suit different approaches, and I like to try and do each puzzle the way that puzzle should be done, I guess. So
Right.
They're like usually when I go into a puzzle, I will have in mind that it will be based on a big global deduction, or it will be more focused on local deductions, and I will focus one way or the other. And usually that will just be a function of what the rule set is. I'll feel that the deductions that come from that rule set are more. Though I can see a lot of local deductions that are interesting in their own right, so I want to focus on those, so that sort of thing. Though I have on occasion done puzzles where I've taken a rule set that is usually used in a local sense and thinking, I want to deliberately subvert this and do something global with it. So a few of mine are like that, I guess.
Interesting. Let's talk about... I know someone had asked a question about this. Let me find their question instead of asking my own question about this. About... Oh, no, I can't find it. Oh, it's Wisteria's question. Many of your puzzles are quite popular, but there's still some that have flown under the radar. What puzzles of yours do you wish got more attention, and why?
I guess pretty most puzzles that only got a few souls, I guess I feel a little bit that way about them. As if I had to pick ones in particular, well, there are puzzles like Roman Lockout, perhaps, which are kind of, I mean, it was as an example of a puzzle where I had a lot of fun exploring the rule set and figuring out the deductions that came from it and then building a puzzle around them, but it didn't receive a huge amount of attention, so I mean, most of my puzzles, to be honest, I'm pleased with in some regards, so it's hard to pick out, and I've been quite fortunate in a lot of the ones that I was particularly pleased with did get a reasonable amount of souls, so I'm often quite pleased with how things turn out. So for the most part, the ones where I would have liked to get a bit more attention, it is just because like only a few people solved it, and it would have been nice to see more people experience the logic that I put into it. I'm sure there's much more to say.
Do you have any, like, I guess, what do you do when you're really proud of a puzzle, but it's not getting as many solves or not getting as much attention as you had hoped to? Do you just sort of like leave it and let it organically grow, or do you go out and try to find people to solve it?
I tend to just leave it. I have once or twice sort of mentioned it in voice chat or maybe Sudoku recommendations, something like that, to see if anyone's interested in solving it. But I guess most of the time, I just kind of leave it, move on, and think about the next puzzle, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Let's go with KNT's question, where he was asking about solving. Oh, I missed it. He said, for someone who is easily one of the most creative and active CTC adjacent setters, judging by LMD statistics, you are comparatively a very inactive solver. Where do you get so many interesting ideas and out-of-the-box ideas if it seems you aren't often solving many out-of-the-box puzzles? Well, first of all, is that not true that you are an active solver, or is that a correct statement?
I do not solve as many puzzles as I would like to. I often get to get distracted by other things. Sometimes, yeah, halfway through solving someone's puzzle, an idea for another puzzle will come to me, and I'll start setting instead. But I would like to solve more puzzles. I think it's I think there are so many good puzzles out there. I mean, I, they deserve to be solved, and it's just me not having a good enough attention span as much as anything. But in terms of like where I get ideas from instead, that's always a tricky question. But I mean, I guess even though I don't solve a huge number myself, I do kind of experience a fair number of puzzles through like CTC itself, and also I've been watching the Zeta Maths channel quite a lot recently and taking part in the collaborative solving there. So I a fair amount of inspiration I get comes from that sort of thing and discussing puzzles with people there and on Discord. So that's the origin of a fair number of my ideas. Like I said, Jormungandr, I was inspired by seeing another puzzle with a similar clue in it and thinking about what to do with it. And
Right.
I think to an extent, I also kind of substitute solving puzzles with the setting process, like taking one of these ideas and thinking, how can I make this into a puzzle is itself a puzzle to be solved in a lot of cases. So
Cool. Robert Tolbert had asked in the chat, what puzzle is the one that you're most proud of?
that is tricky. I think Fairy Rings probably is quite high on the list. Which is well, we talked about Quorum Rings already, and Fairy Rings was kind of it's the one occasion where I set a puzzle and then thought, like afterwards, I want to do that idea better. And sort of went back to it and did something else with it. And so yeah, that's that went through a lot of iterations. If you looked at the original draft of that puzzle, it looks nothing like it. But by the end of it, I was very pleased with how it came out. And there was also quite the most recent puzzle that I published, Recurring Nightmares. That was I was quite proud of how that one turned out, partly because it was again a very long setting process because I went through several different drafts of it after repeatedly breaking it and then trying to figure out how to fix the break and then breaking it again and so on. And so I put a lot of work into it, but also a lot of people have well, it hasn't got a huge number of souls, but it is a fairly tricky puzzle, I will admit, and fairly daunting rule set probably, so that's fair. But the responses that I have got from it have been very positive, and that's been nice.
Cool. Math Pesto had asked, what do you think is the most underrated constraint?
Again, a tricky question. That's the sort of thing I find very difficult to judge. Like, if I I can't think of particularly any constraints that stand out as being underused, but that's possibly I am a bit of a bit prone to jumping on bandwagons, so a lot of constraints that I do a lot with are ones that other people are doing a lot with as well. So it's that does kind of skew things. I guess that One thing that did come to mind while I was thinking about this question, though, which is kind of something adjacent to a constraint I've been doing a lot with, which I've started to realize the potential and do more exploration of, is like the disjoint sets that have to be determined by the solver, which arise in doubler rules and other similar modifier sets, but not specifically the modifier logic, but the disjoint set logic, and the fact that you can also kind of treat that disjoint set as an extra digit in the puzzle sometimes as well. I think it's there's a lot more exploration of what can be done with that I think can be done.
Interesting. I think the puzzle that the 6x6 that you set for Zeta Math, which used doublers without any clues in it, it was just like a classic doubler, is a good example of that idea, some kind of disjoint where you don't know where the disjoint is.
That is, real, strictly speaking, that is a disjoint extra set puzzle. I just called it a doubler puzzle for the joke, basically.
Yeah. I mean, it was interesting in terms of thinking about that logic in terms of where the doublers are is easier than thinking about it in terms of the whole disjoint stuff. So it's kind of cool. But it is sort of a joke puzzle. So I'm wondering, I know you have a great sense of humor because you always say things in chat and Zeta stream or other streams that make me do a good chuckle, or you know, breathe out of my nose. You know the kind of jokes, and what do you think about humor in puzzles?
In general, I guess I'm a fan of it. But it's perhaps tricky to pull off. Like, I guess I've enjoyed doing a few sort of. Well, I'm sort of slipping into answering someone else's question, the one about 6x6s, but I've enjoyed messing around with mini puzzles recently, partly because you can. I think that's the classic doubler one is the main one that comes to mind, where I kind of made it to tell a joke, but I think they work well for us in that they're a sort of small puzzle, so the joke doesn't wear itself out by the end of the solve, whereas like having a joke in a 9x9, often it might sort of be you tell the joke at the beginning in the figuring out of the rules, and then the rest is just a 9x9 puzzle. Or you leave the joke until right by the end when everyone's forgotten that little technicality is in the rules, and people spend ages scratching their heads wondering what's going on. But yeah,
you want to share the joke with them, not play the joke on them.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think I enjoy a good joke, so if it's done well, I definitely approve.
So you've said you enjoy humor in puzzles, but what is humor in puzzles? Because I know a lot of people have different. Like, what is an example of humor in puzzles that's not the 6x6 that we were just talking about?
I mean, the example that comes to mind is Fistamerfel's April Fool's puzzle.
Yeah.
Because I think a key aspect of humor for me is just subverting expectations. So, like, saying something that you would not expect to be said in that context, something like that. So, in puzzles, that's something that you can definitely do by taking a rule set you constructing a rule set that has a very non-obvious but very powerful implication. So the joke is the punchline is figuring out that implication and then using that to solve the puzzle instead of what you were expecting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, so and yeah, I think that's that sort of humor is mainly what comes to mind when I think of joke puzzles. The sort of unexpected meaning of a rule set.
Right.
And yeah, taking I think that's also one of the things that I think about it. That is one thing that made me enjoy doubler puzzles quite a lot, because one thing you can do with them is just break the standard expectations of whatever constraint you're using, putting a 5 on a whispers line or something like that.
Or having a
I
cage that's
I,
like 100 or something like that. Like,
yeah,
it's just funny. It's just hilarious, really.
yeah.
Kodak had asked, what are your fastest and slowest puzzles, i.e. shortest and longest time to set?
Yeah, that's was my in terms of how long it takes me to set a puzzle, it varies massively by puzzle. There are some where it has taken barely any time at all, an hour or two to put together a puzzle. Those tend to be ones where it's primarily just standard constraints like pure arrow puzzles. So I couldn't say which was exactly the shortest one to set, but there are things like I think Overfull, which is just a pure arrow puzzle. I think that was a fairly quick one to set. Well, the ones that take longer usually are ones with complex and very constraining rule sets. So I'm spending a lot more time doing battle with the rule set, trying to work out how to use it to force anything without breaking the whole puzzle, something like that. Whereas with standard constraints, it's a lot, especially if it's one you're very familiar with, it's a lot easier to, at each stage, decide on a good constraint that's going to be powerful but not too powerful.
Mm-hmm.
But so the ones that have taken longest, like I think the longest one from initial idea to final puzzle was Jormungandr, but I did have a fair break in the middle of that where I wasn't working on it and then decided to go back and give it another go. In
Right.
terms of amount of work to set it, probably the longest one may well be Recurring Nightmares, because as I said, I broke that one quite a few times and had to restart almost from the beginning several times. So for a week or two, I was kind of spending a few hours each day coming up with a new version of the puzzle, testing it, and rinse and repeat.
Speaking of breaking the puzzle over and over again and coming back to it and getting annoyed, is there anything in setting that really annoys you other than the obvious breaking it and having to come back to it over and over again?
Yeah, I think the puzzles that the most frustrating setting experiences I've had are the ones where I have come up with a novel rule set that is incredibly constraining due to the sheer amount of interactions that it causes, because it's the horrible thing where you're going through a puzzle and it's like you put in a clue and then suddenly everything is flowing really nicely and you're filling in digits all over the place and
Yes.
suddenly you've got 2 4s in a row and it just kind of comes out of nowhere and hits you in the face. So those are very stressful ones to set because of the mood whiplash that it keeps inflicting. That is rather self-inflicted. I keep choosing to set puzzles with that type of rule set. That's to give a specific example of a puzzle that was like that, I think Yin Yang Ice Barn is a pretty good one. A non-Sudoku that I set recently, where part of what makes the puzzle work is that there are some very complex and powerful interactions between the two rule sets that I used, but they also meant that it was very easy to break the puzzle or create something that there's no way to resolve,
Right.
or things like that. So it was a lot of trial and error to find a way of getting that one to properly work.
Yeah, I guess in a way, the way you phrase it actually is kind of really funny to me, because it's almost like the rule set itself is teasing you or trolling you into thinking, oh, this is so great, it's going to work out so well, and then it's like, haha, haha, played trick on you, there's 2 4s in row 4 or whatever. Yeah,
Yep.
it's not nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That it definitely feels that way sometimes, because sometimes there's a particular arrangement somewhere in the grid that is so perfect for a particular clue to be put in order to exploit the way it's laid out, but then 20 digits later you find out that it was broken from the beginning. Sometimes it was actually inherently broken to begin with, and you have to backtrack even further, but yeah, that's a separate thing. It's yeah.
Da, 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 da. Oh, right. Do you have any puzzling pet peeve in terms of solving? So is there something that you see other setters doing that really annoys you in a puzzle?
Um, Not hugely. No particular things come to mind. Like, I think the thing that I'm kind of hesitant to say anything, because I know that like a lot of the things that some of the things that I do find frustrating are things that are hard to avoid,
Right.
and almost certainly are things that people have experienced in my own puzzles, I imagine. But like
Yeah.
I think if I find a solve frustrating, it's usually because I don't feel confident that I found the right logic.
Mm.
And sometimes it might actually be that I have found the right logic, but for whatever reason, it doesn't necessarily feel like I don't feel reassured that I'm on the right track. It's kind of, it's a matter of telegraphing, I guess,
Mm.
whether there are things in the puzzle that kind of signpost and say, yes, you found this, you're on the right track, or rather, you've just spent 5 minutes eliminating possibility after possibility in the cage, and it's like, there was probably a better way of doing it. And part of
Mm.
why this frustrates me is because if there is another way of finding it that I was meant to do and that the setter was hoping, I feel a bit like I've let the setter down, and like they wanted me to see something and I haven't, and I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's but that, like, I know from experience that coming up with that sort of telegraphing, there have been occasions where I have very deliberately put something into the puzzle to telegraph it, like, this logic only works if there are so many of these things in the grid, and I've put exactly that many in the grid to say, I didn't actually need all of these there, but I put them in there so that you're on the right track. At least that's my hope.
Right.
But sometime, like, particularly if it's a break-in puzzle where you've got a lot of things interacting, and changing anything even slightly would just cause the logic to not work. You don't have the freedom to choose to telegraph, and you just have to hope that the tightness. Well, in those cases, you can, I guess, hope that the inherent tightness of the structure is enough to have the same results, but you can't choose to do that. You just have to do the puzzle as is. Is sometimes the case.
Right. Do you find it hard to gauge your own telegraphing in puzzles, or do you sort of know when something is too obscure?
Sometimes sometimes I feel confident, other times not so much. That is one of the things I value about the testing channel on CTC Discord. I can actually get feedback from people and see how they saw the opening and some questions like that. So it's yeah, I'm always aware that someone could see my puzzle very differently from how I saw it.
Right.
So I bear that in mind, but of course I put in the effort to at least try and telegraph it.
When you're going to look, or when you're deciding whether or not you want to solve something, what makes you not want to solve it versus solve it? Or finish solving it?
Well, if I've started something and decide to not finish it, it's usually because I've broken the puzzle too many times. It's like the kind where I think I'm on the right track and then suddenly hit a contradiction and have to rewind and try again. And if this happens too many times, eventually I just get fatigued and want to do something else, I guess.
Right.
Normally if I'm just right off the top put off from even trying it, it's because the rule set looks it's a really complex rule set that just scares me, or it's a really busy grid that I'm a bit unsure I want to take the time to dig into. It's I mean, yeah, but like I say, I don't solve a huge number of puzzles and would like to solve more. So it's
So we've already covered that you enjoy setting a little bit more than solving. Would you set puzzles even if no one would solve them? Like if you're the last person on Earth?
yeah, well, I mean, I guess probably, as I enjoy the setting experience in itself quite a lot. But I mean, I do really enjoy getting feedback from people who have solved the puzzle, and like part of what I like about setting puzzles is not just finding the logic but sharing it with other people. So the sharing of puzzles is a big part for me, definitely. But well, as you say, if I was the last person on Earth, then I probably wouldn't take that as a reason to stop.
Right. There's inherent enjoyment in the setting process, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. How do you come up with your puzzle names? Because like I don't even remember what the heck Jormungandr is. Like what?
That was I mean, Jormungandr is it's the Norse world serpent.
Right,
So
right.
That was when coming up with puzzle names, I like to try and think of something that is in some way a reference to what the puzzle is. And in that case, I've got one big long line. I'll name it after a huge snake. It's not a hugely complex one. I mean, I know there's the ongoing debate about whether it's good to have a sort of the sort of title I give, I guess, or the more descriptive name of a rule set title. And I tend to favour the not a literal rule set title, partly because as much as anything, it's like I think it's I like the opportunity to have a bit of wit there. I get the reason for wanting a more descriptive title, but I feel that yeah, it's kind of it's in an ideal world the forums in which we share the puzzles would be differently structured so that you would have both, so
Yes.
that I'm sort of being a bit idealist and wanting to live in that world. But as much as anything, it's just giving the tags more focus. But I like
Right.
the opportunity to have that little extra bit of wit. And in some cases, you can also use it for a little bit of extra telegraphing if you want to. I try not to be too overt, like having the sort of "it's a setup" title, but something that hints a bit at what the puzzle is about, I guess. I've done that on a few occasions where I was like, like the quorum rings and fairy rings one, as
Yeah.
Simon noted, though, as Simon noted at the end of the video rather than at the start, part of the reason for putting the word rings in there was because I was not confident that the trick was sufficiently telegraphed, so I put an extra bit of a hint there.
Yeah, he probably started this
Which
all by
I
saying, these
don't
don't look like
do.
fairies at all.
That's more overt than I would tend to be these days, I think. Partly because I'm a bit more confident in the setting, I guess. Partly because I just like being a bit more subtle, perhaps.
Yeah. Which of your puzzles was most important for your development as a setter? Like, if you didn't set it, you wouldn't be the same setter you are today.
Well, I think the one that feels most like a milestone would probably be Quorum Rings, because that was the point. Like you said, you described this at the beginning as me having like invented the theorem or discovered it. I forget what exactly you said, but it's
I
kind
think
of
discovered.
when I first came up with that weird configuration, I actually put a post on. I put a post in the puzzles setting channel on Discord saying I just discovered that this grid configuration is broken. I'm sure people already know about this, but I found it weird. It was because the basically I discovered the relationship by putting a German whispers line all the way around the Fistmafell ring in a diagonal X puzzle, and then hitting solve and finding that it didn't work. I was like, what? But so yeah, at the time I thought people know about this. People have been doing this for ages. I'm sure all of this is old hat. But then from the response and like not just to that puzzle, but also seeing like other similar puzzles with stuff like that, so I was realizing that wait, actually this is something new. So it's like it was the realization that there's still things to discover, and like a lot it's a lot more of an exploratory thing than just sort of reusing the same ideas. So I think that gave me a lot more confidence in my more exploratory setting.
Definitely, I mean, you have explored many things that I don't think a
Mhm.
lot of people would have explored if you didn't do it already. Uh, how so I think when I first turned around to become like a Jay Dyer fan, and I think you know that I'm a Jay Dyer fan. I'm always like, wow, this is so cool. Um, was when I saw the deconstruction for the first time. That is such a cool idea that I when I first saw it, I thought, wow, like one, how did Jay come up with this? And two, how did no one come up with this before Jay? Because like this is so cool. It seems so obvious
Mm.
that it should exist, but it's just like it's perfect. It is just so perfect. How did you come up with the deconstruction?
I'm not sure. It's that puzzle became, and the deconstruction genre, it became a much bigger thing than I had any expectation that it would. I imagined that it would be just a sort of a one shot play on the idea of a Sudoku, basically. As I mean, the name is a bit of a hint as to my motivation to make it. Basically, it was I was inspired by the idea of chaos construction, which is kind of taking the concept of Sudoku and removing one of the key components of it, sort of taking the taking well, I mean, irregular Sudokus already exist, but as well as taking the regular shape out of it, also taking the given regions out of it. So I was just sort of I felt like doing something similar but take a different thing. So I kept the regular regions but took the tight, fully filled grid out, I guess. Yeah. But I mean, yeah, that's it was a lot of fun to set. It was again one of those cases of taking that new concept, thinking through all of the logic that you could do with it, like the implications of having empty spaces between the grids. And yeah, so I'm not sure I could say exactly how that why did that specific idea come to me? I don't know. It was just the random combination of ideas that popped into my head on that occasion.
Well,
But it
what
was
really strikes me about the deconstruction, I mean the initial one, there have been some that have gone against this, but the initial one has no like region building rules into it other than you have to place 3 by 3 boxes. Whereas every other chaos construction is fundamentally based on we are building regions. There is some rule that you have to follow to build regions. So you have to build these regions using something, except for maybe Rainbow Springs by Bremster.
Mm.
But like it's so cool that there is no rule to build the regions. They exist somewhere in the grid. You have to find them. Like it that's the thing that sort of stuck out to me. And
yeah, I see what you mean. That has been that was then quite a large part of some of the later ideas I had about deconstructions. Like part of what drew me to the idea of Jormungandr when I had the idea was the fact that it is quite different from chaos construction in that way, because the thing that forces the regions is the fact that they have to have digits in them, and you need to occasionally need the rule sets means that occasionally you need to have cells that don't have regions. But once you're placing regions, because each one is a fixed shape, it's kind of it takes less. Well, yeah, it takes less information to place it then in a chaos construction, basically, because you've just got 2 coordinates instead of an entire arbitrary shape.
yeah,
So the region building ends up being a much more powerful tool, I guess. It's a it was I think I properly appreciated this actually about the deconstructions when I was watching Tallcat's setting video, where he mentions at one point that he likes to put into the solve path of a puzzle like sort of occasional bursts of progress to reward the solver for getting that far. Like you get here and suddenly you've got an extra 10 digits or something like that. And I realized that I think part of what makes deconstruction work is that it's kind of tools to that. Once you start placing regions, the way that they push against each other and move and force themselves around the grid means that you can suddenly get a lot of progress out of one small deduction, which I think is what works in its favor.
yeah. I mean, if you place box 1 in an extreme low position, you can force almost the entire grid. Like
Yeah,
it's very explosive in that way.
yeah.
I lost it. I had such a good point. I swear. Are you surprised? You said you were surprised at how much the deconstruction took off. Are you surprised that it's so versatile, or are you just surprised that other people were taking your idea and doing stuff with it?
Surprised that other people were taking the idea and doing stuff with it. It's one of the few occasions where the name of one of my puzzles is literally just the name of the genre, but that happened accidentally because people made it a genre after I made the first puzzle, and
Yeah.
the idea, yeah, just the fact that I managed to accidentally create a genre is one of the weirdest things that's happened to me in my setting career. It was it was very very cool to watch and also take part in once it had got off the ground. But yeah, of course it was completely accidental. It was definitely very cool. Yeah, what I enjoy about setting puzzles is exploring the possibilities of an idea, and I gave a lot of people motivation to do exactly that, so it was very very satisfying.
I mean, if I'm not mistaken, Math Pesto's sort of, or is it Math Pesto who made the Suguru deconstruction?
Yeah, I believe so.
It that's derived from the original deconstruction, right?
I believe so. I mean, I'm basing that it's yeah. They're a very different type of puzzle from the deconstruction in that it uses regular grids, but I mean, I assumed mostly from the name that that there was some inspiration from the deconstruction there. But yeah.
It does make it a bit confusing when you're trying to recommend a puzzle to someone and you're like, oh, it's a deconstruction, and then you're like, oh, it's a 11 by 11 deconstruction? No, it's a Suguru deconstruction. Oh. Okay.
But I said that accidentally creating a genre was the weirdest thing that's happened to me in my setting career. The weirdest thing was when people started specifically putting Jay Dyer deconstruction rules apply in their rule sets.
Yeah.
But yeah. Yeah. Because yeah, as I said, those the Suguru chaos deconstructions, they are a very different thing again, but also very very interesting puzzles in their own right. I've mostly watched them being solved rather than solved them myself. Again, that's just because that's my being slow to solve things habits.
It's a very different mindset that you have to be in to solve one of them, I think, because there's blank cells and then also construction, which is a lot. Robert Tolbert had asked earlier in the stream in the chat, if you break a puzzle, do you start over or look where you went wrong?
I try. I'm not entirely sure if that question is asking about setting or solving. Although
that is a good point.
Though,
I think it's about setting.
The answers aren't hugely different.
Okay.
Yeah, from context, it's probably about setting, but yeah, it's I try to figure out where I went wrong. Like that's partly because a number of the deductions that I've put in puzzles that I like most are cases where I broke it and then spent a while figuring out why it broke and then finding a way to use the interactions that caused the break to force something else. Yeah, like the diagonal theorem was exactly a case that I broke a puzzle with a single clue and then figured out why. But the occasions when there were some times where it just feels like too much effort to figure out why it broke because it's just so unclear. in
Right.
which case I will start again. And there have also been times where I figured out exactly what caused the break, but it's kind of the point at which, well, the example I'm thinking of here was a case where I had made a false assumption. So the puzzle wasn't broken, but I wasn't certain that it was unique and the intended solve didn't work. And that the false assumption was in like the second step of the puzzle.
Ugh.
So on that occasion, I had to rewind and start from scratch. This was recurring nightmares that I'm thinking of here, but in
Is
that
that where the
case,
name is that where the name comes from?
I came up with the name before I'd even started setting it because it's a reference to A, the use of doublers, and B, the puzzle's Ace's Nightmare, which is one of the two puzzles that directly inspired it. But
Right.
it ended up being a very prophetic name, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah. In that case, actually, it was interesting. It was an interesting process of setting it, because there's a very definite solve path that I have in mind going through it. Like this clue does this clue does this clue does this, and each time I went through a revision, I actually largely tried to preserve that path, just because I was quite pleased with it, and it was just kind of finding a way of adjusting each step to fix the break in it. There was only one case where I had to change one step more significantly, because trying to preserve it was just wreaking havoc on the rest of the grid, as it relied on forcing a particular doubler into a particular cage, and that meant that I couldn't use it elsewhere and things like that. So yeah, so it was an interesting mix, I guess, of the two, keeping the path the same, but also starting from scratch in the setting.
Right. Codex had asked, I have the impression that you're one of the most productive setters out there, which makes me wonder how many unpublished puzzles you've got, and if any, why didn't we get to see them yet?
Yeah, I think I said at the beginning that the way I balance puzzle setting with the rest of my life is badly. I have a habit of just sort of sitting down in the evening and making a puzzle, so I do end up producing quite a few, which I do kind of make more puzzles than I know what to do with. I have a bit of a backlog of puzzles that I want to publish at the moment, but want to spread them out so as not to just sort of overload my Logic Masters page and have them be ignored because there's a later one, that sort of thing. But as I also tend to keep procrastinating on that, so I could do with speeding things up. So it's yeah, in terms of how many like puzzles I don't show at all, there actually aren't a huge number. Or the occasions when I don't show a puzzle, even if I did finish it, it's because I want to try again and do the same idea but better.
Mhm.
So, like, it's basically, I think of the puzzle as a first draft rather than a puzzle that doesn't get showed off. Most of the puzzles that I do finish, I do put in the testing on the CTC Discord, so there aren't a huge number of kind of lost puzzles, I guess. But yeah, there's a fair number that I've made and they're just languishing there and not getting properly published. I do occasionally go back and sort of look for the ones that are just sitting there and think, do I want to do anything with this? But it's kind of with the number that I end up producing, it's just like there tends to be another puzzle that I want to publish more, so I deal with that instead.
I almost feel like sometimes there's expiry on puzzles. Like I let a puzzle sit for too long, and then I look back at it and I realize that several other people have made similar puzzles or used similar ideas in the meantime, and then I'm like, this is garbage now, and just throw it away. Uh,
Mm.
do you have the same sort of feeling when you look back at your
Um,
unused?
That might be a part of it. It's more often that it's just it's been out of my mind so long that I can't remember the solved path, and I'm less invested in it as much as anything.
Right.
Or, as I said, there's just another puzzle I've made more recently that I'm more invested in. Kind of a relative thing. But yeah. Between this and the fact that I don't solve that many puzzles, I do occasionally think I should take a pause from setting and actually solve some other people's puzzles instead to kind of kill two birds with one stone. But then a puzzle idea comes to me and I start setting again instead. So it's kind of I'm terrible at time management.
Are most of the things you're setting these days novel ideas, or do you still use standard rule sets all the time?
I guess I mostly set novel rule sets these days, or well, I've been going through a phase of standard rule set with doublers, but that's kind of novel rule sets.
Yeah.
But I do still enjoy occasionally making a pure standard rule set puzzle. I made a number of arrow puzzles. It's one of my favorite genres to go back to like that, and a few killers as well. But I guess the thing that I enjoy more in setting is the exploration of a novel rule set rather than playing around with a standard rule set. But I'm nonetheless I'm heavily influenced by the puzzles I see from other people. So like if an incredibly interesting killer puzzle appears on Cracking the Cryptic, then I will suddenly feel an urge to make a pure killer puzzle again or something like that.
Right.
Sometimes when that sort of thing happens, I'll usually just sort of make a blank grid and start playing around with cages and see if any interesting interactions pop up, and if I find something, I make a puzzle. If I don't, I've just been playing around with the grid for a little while, having fun, and then I leave it at that, and a puzzle doesn't actually come out of it.
Okay, we'll ask these two questions. So first of all, what's a novel rule set that you think has more potential than just like a one-off that you wish other people would look at more, that you've made? Maybe if you can't think of one that you've made, something else that someone else made that you like.
Yeah, often the rule sets that I come up with completely from scratch, I don't tend to think of in terms of I tend to try and sort of think what to do, think what can be done with it, and then condense that into a puzzle. So I don't often think in terms of it becoming a bigger thing. Like I said, when that happened with deconstruction, it took me by surprise. I think there was one actually, and actually, now I think about it, this would have been a good answer to the puzzles that I would have liked to see more attention. But there was an ambiguous arrows Sudoku that I made a little while back, which is the idea was that each clue is like a standard arrow clue, but the bulb cell could be anywhere on the line and you're not told where it is. And I thought that was an interesting new clue type that I would have liked to maybe see a bit more of, or a bit more attention to from the puzzle itself. But at the same time, I would certainly not begrudge people not giving a go setting with it, because it was a very tricky puzzle to set. But maybe I think there might be potential in that sort of idea.
Cool.
That's in a number of ways quite similar to other new rule sets that have appeared, like double arrows, with sort of other ways of playing with the idea of an arrow clue.
Yeah. Sure. And now for a very tricky question, if you only had to, or if you had to only set one variant or puzzle type, what would you choose to set, like for the rest of your career?
I think between lines are the ones that I've been the specific rule type that I've been enjoying most in itself. So possibly that.
Hmm.
I was initially going to say killer, then I remembered between lines. There's a lot of killer type logic that can be done with between lines, of course. So they're similar in a number of ways, but also a lot more flexible. Yeah, I've had a lot of fun making various between line. Wait, did I say between lines?
Yes.
I suddenly realised that I've been talking about the wrong thing. I meant equal sum lines.
Yeah, I actually sort of thought that when you said the killer deductions thing. I was like,
Yeah.
in terms of geometry, I guess, yeah.
That
But
happens to me sometimes. I start saying something and then halfway through realise, wait, I've been using the wrong word. My memory's weird like that. But yeah, there's equal sum lines is the one I was trying to say.
or as some people like to remind me constantly, it is now called region sum lines. Well, it had two
Well,
names, you know.
They've been equal sum lines, they've been region sum lines. In one of my puzzles, they were even referred to as box sum lines when Simon did the solve. They've gone through a number of names.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that clue, whatever it's being referred to.
Yeah. I think that's a good answer. That might even be my answer, but I can't even, yeah. It's hard for me to say, should not say killer. Okay. What is the best piece of feedback that you've ever gotten on a puzzle?
I'm not sure I can remember specific examples well enough, but like instead of sort of talking about specific cases, like the things that I find most useful in feedback on well, one thing that I find very useful in feedback is a brief description of the logic you used when solving the puzzle, because, like I said, one of the things that I often worry about is how good the telegraphing is. So hearing from you what the logic you used, it's good to see that you had the same idea as I had, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And like, yeah, of course, if there, and it's also if there's. It's also nice to hear, like, if there's a particular step that you enjoyed, or even a particular step that you didn't enjoy, then that sort of thing is nice to hear, because it's good. It helps sort of gauge what things makes the puzzle satisfying, and yeah, that's well, like I said, one of the things I enjoy about setting is sharing the puzzles with people. So knowing what people find enjoyable in a puzzle and what people don't find enjoyable in a puzzle helps me gauge that.
Definitely. Related to this, what's the best LMD comment that you've ever read? If you can remember specific examples. If you can't, that's okay.
Well, I mean, the comments that tend to stick in my mind particularly are the ones from names that I recognise. Like if I get a comment from Customer Fell, that's made my week. Or like if I make a non-Sudoku puzzle and one of the big names in non-Sudoku puzzles comments on it, that's very flattering. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of a bit of ego stroking, but the one I definitely enjoy puzzles that are saying how much someone enjoyed the puzzle or something like that. hard to deny.
Okay. Do you have any favorite YouTube comment from one of your features? Those are even less memorable.
I if there are you get some comments on the YouTube videos like from people who are really pleased to have been able to solve one of the puzzles, that sort of thing, and that's always nice to get, because while I do enjoy making the occasional extremely difficult puzzle, I also like to try and get some of them to be reasonably solvable. So it's nice to see that people have managed to do so. Like I think it I think there were, like, on Tetra Killer, I think there were a number of comments on that, because that was one puzzle that I think actually ended up being a lot more approachable than I had expected it to be, and it was pleasing to see people getting to enjoy it.
Definitely. What I've noticed about your puzzles is that you're very versatile. So you set easy, you set hard, you set novel, you set standard, you set global, you set local. Like, there's a huge versatility. How do you think you gained this versatility in setting? Is it just the fact that you set so often?
It's probably a large part of it, and I think it's just I think I mean, I guess if I'm that versatile, it's because I like to explore things. I like to try a rule set I haven't used before and see what I can do with it. That sort of thing. Just take the time to experiment with the rule sets and see what can be done with it, and then make a puzzle with it. And on the point of difficulty in particular, I'm not hugely good at gauging difficulty of an idea.
Mm-hmm.
So I usually just let a puzzle be as difficult as it's going to be for the idea I'm trying to express, I guess. And I think I've got a single 1-star puzzle on my Logic Masters page, which is the treasure map one, and I had fully expected that to be an incredibly difficult puzzle when I started with the idea. But then when I got to the end of it, it was incredibly approachable and quite obvious in hindsight why. But yeah, that one caught me off guard, and is a good example of why I am not good at judging difficulty. The few occasions where I've specifically set out to make an approachable puzzle, or reasonably approachable puzzle, has always been quite daunting, because I just don't know if I'm going to succeed or not.
Right.
But yeah, there have been plenty of occasions where I've come up with a very complex set of interactions that I want to put together into a break, and I fully expect those puzzles to be difficult. But even then, actually, a few occasions I've been surprised, like I post this and then half an hour later someone solves it, and I'm sometimes a little disappointed by that. But if they enjoy it, that's fine by me, and I'm happy for it to be that level of difficulty.
Right. The Sonic person had asked, who are your favorite setters?
Well, I think by far the setter that is currently influencing me most is Zeta Math. But well, I was about to say, but that is because of, but I don't want to. That sounds mean. He is he's a very very good setter, makes very good puzzles. Part of the reason why he specifically is influencing me so much is just exposure. Like I say, I've been watching his streams quite a lot recently,
Yeah.
and there's been a lot of discussion of his puzzles specifically. And like I said, the one I posted most recently is very much a reference to two particular puzzles of his. There's and yeah, of course, as I said, the one of the setters that was a large part of influencing me into setting it specifically, largely indirectly through references to his work, was Vistamafal. But yeah, of course, that is quite in part a function of Simon's obsession with Vistamafal. He was the names I heard quite a lot of in videos as a result.
Right.
If I solved more puzzles, I would give an answer of whose puzzles I enjoy solving most, and it is to my detriment that I am not able to give a good answer to that question. But there are so.
Yeah. Actually, back to solving for just a second. I noticed that you usually will solve anything that has deconstruction in the name, like Jay Dyer deconstruction. Is it just sort of a pride thing, like I want to solve anything that was inspired by me sort of deal?
Oh, it was on a few occasions. It was because those puzzles specifically came to my attention because I was pinged in the testing post.
Right.
But I mean, partly it was enjoying seeing people enjoying playing around with an idea that I come up with. So there's definitely a part of that. As I yeah.
All right. Have you done any collaborative setting? I don't know of any collaborations, but have you done any?
I haven't done much. Like I've I did. There was a while back. There was collaboration was the monthly prompt on the
Right.
CTC Discord, and I think the only two times where I've collaboratively set a puzzle were during that, and because that sort of spawned opportunities, and I decided to take some of them. And one of those was providing a chunk for the Sudoku pillar that
Clover. Yeah.
Clover that Clover organised, and another was it was just two of us setting a puzzle back and forth of I can't remember who it was with, unfortunately, but yeah, so someone had half of the idea for puzzle, and for the prompt wanted to see if someone else wanted to join in, so I volunteered on the testing channel, and yeah, I think part of the reason why I don't do a huge amount of collaborative setting, partly I guess just because of my natural shyness. I'm not very good at sort of taking initiative on reaching out to someone or that sort of thing. So that's part of why I haven't done much of that, probably. So it was the one that I did. It was fun to do. I enjoyed the back and forth exchange of ideas.
Is there a piece of advice you received early on in your setting career that really helped you?
Nothing particular that comes to mind. I mean, I did a fair amount of sort of I did a bit like talking to people in the setting channel and reading conversations. So I did pick up a fair amount of I did pick up advice from other people. I wouldn't want to say otherwise, but yeah, just can't pick a particular example out of my memory.
I know it's not a piece of advice, but you did talk about earlier in reference to Fist and Fell, like sort of setting outside of your comfort zone, like setting new ideas, different ideas, and I think that's a pretty valuable piece of advice for people.
Yeah,
Just to pick
definitely.
something.
Yeah, I think in terms of advice I would give, I think that's definitely part of it. Explore ideas, rule sets that when I first saw equal sum lines, I was a bit daunted by the rule sets, but took a bit of time to explore it and ended up setting quite a few puzzles with it.
Yeah.
But try things out to see how they work to get that sort of experience. And yeah, even once you're familiar with the rule sets, it's nice to just occasionally take time to experiment, just sort of put things in a grid, see how they interact, even without expecting it to turn into a puzzle, and interesting ideas might come out of it.
Yeah, it's great advice. Is there any piece of advice you hear often that you disagree with?
Not really. Mostly the advice I've heard is pretty good, I'd say. I mean, yeah.
Okay. When you go down to set a non-Sudoku, which I know you set a couple of, or yeah, at least a few.
Yeah.
Do you set it in the same way, or is it a completely different process?
For the most part, it's the same, although when I'm setting non-Sudokus, it will almost always fall into the sort of chain of deductions style of setting, as opposed to the break-in style, to go back
Mhm.
to the two types that I described earlier. That's There haven't been many occasions where I've found like pencil puzzle genres that have the same amount of sort of global interconnectedness that the Sudoku grid has, so I haven't come up with as many ideas for that sort of global reasoning in pencil puzzles. So that's the main reason why it just I mean yeah. I've occasionally managed to do it, but it sort of requires finding that it requires a huge amount of clues to set up and doesn't feel as satisfying as a result, that sort of thing.
Right.
So that's I guess the only way it differs, although it's similar in style in a number of ways to how I set Sudokus, but only a subset of the Sudokus I set. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
Yeah. Yes. When I'm deciding what type of pencil puzzles, though, again, that is quite similar in that I like to pick a combination of rules and explore the interactions with them rather than setting a pure sliver link or a pure Philomeno, that sort of thing.
Right. How would you describe your reputation as a constructor?
Scary. And I mean, the fact that I have a reputation scares me a little,
Okay.
rather than I think my reputation is scary. Although Simon has said on stream that I scare him, so I guess that's answered both ways. Yeah, it's I'm not a hugely outgoing person in general, so I the extent to which I've become a recognized name is definitely a weird experience.
Mhm.
Not entirely sure what to do with it. But it's fun.
Do you feel like the perception of you from others matches like reality or your perception of yourself?
Um, In some ways, I guess. Like you were talking about like sense of humor, that sort of thing. Those are that's kind of that's the sort of way I like to be seen, I
Right.
guess. So.
I mean, in a way, like the one line equals like that's just hilarious. It is actually just funny.
Simon's response to it was definitely very funny. I
Yeah,
enjoyed that video a
it's
lot.
just stupid. It's so stupid. Yeah, it's good. uh, I had a lot of fun editing that intro and just going through, because he freaks out about it for like 10 minutes. So I just take like 2 second clips of him freaking out for the first 10 minutes, which was fun. Do you have any puzzling regrets? Any puzzle you'd like to sort of redo or take back?
Uh, None particularly come to mind, but I think that I'm a fair. I think that mostly I'm just a fairly sort of forgiving temperament, so a lot of them are like, it's not perfect, but I don't really have any complaints about it. There aren't really, there aren't really anywhere it's like, yeah, like there was the one occasion where, like I said with Core and Rings, I decided I wanted to do that idea again and made a second puzzle out of it. But I'm still pleased with the first one in its own right.
Okay. Where did the name Jay Dyer come from?
It's my name.
Oh, okay. I was worried
Not
about
much to
that
it.
being the answer.
I I I have had a number of like avatars and screen names on the internet, but when I got into the setting community, I was in a phase of not being particularly attached to the most recent active avatar I had, so I just decided to go with my own name and stick with that. I wondered about coming up with a new name to replace it and have that as my screen name, as a fair number of big setters are obviously using pseudonyms, but
Mhm. Um,
it didn't feel like I on one of my previous screen names I slightly regretted it afterwards because it was kind of just a silly thing chosen at the spur of the moment and ended up becoming a bit more than it really had any right to be. So I decided to just go with my real name because it is what it is, and I'm not going to start to feel uncomfortable with being known by that a year later or something.
yeah, you're talking to someone who built their brand around meme Rister, so yeah, I know where your head's at. What a stupid name. Um, Rum Planer had asked, what new features would the perfect setting tool have if you could choose anything you would like?
Mm. Well, there are two things that came to mind. I mean, one is a fairly simple practical thing, which is just what one thing that the currently available tools noticeably lack is the ability to save your progress, basically.
Mhm.
And so beyond just storing a big link in a text file, so having the ability to do that, and also being able to either store your undo history in the file or like record rollback points to make it
Right.
easier to unwind when you inevitably break something. The other thing that came to mind, which is somewhat more ambitious, is some kind of scripting support to allow you to make a custom rule set and have the solver use it.
Have the computer solver use it?
Yeah.
Okay.
The computer solver. So that like if it's got like a true candidates feature, so that it could take that into account in a that is certainly much more ambitious than the ability to save your progress, but it would be
Yeah. Funnily enough, that's
definitely something that I would find use in.
Yeah. It seems that people have implemented rule sets rather than, the simple like save your progress sort of implementation. So it might be good to suggest more simple things that would be very convenient if they existed. So, what environment do you prefer to set in?
In terms of like, do you mean PEMP or F puzzles, that sort of environment?
Actually, I sort of meant more like if it's loud or if there's music on, can you set or do you set in?
I'll quite often set while watching something. In fact, like watching a stream, or of course, if I'm setting while watching someone solving a Sudoku, I'll often I'm not good enough to be able to concentrate equally on both at the same time, so I'll often just sort of spend a while setting and then look back to see how they're doing.
Right.
But yeah, I tend to like to have something else on in the background, whether it's a set solving stream or a film or just music. Or I will sometimes, if I've got an idea going through my head, I'll even just like set on the bus on using my phone if I'm going somewhere. That's a little trickier in that there are a small range of options available practically on the phone, but
yeah,
depending on the puzzle type.
You mentioned that you sometimes create puzzles as sort of a first draft. How often do you need a first draft before you come up with something that you really like, or how many first drafts do you need before you settle on something?
Yeah, it definitely varies from puzzle to puzzle. Like there have been a fair number of cases where the puzzles kind of just worked the first time. Like those tend to be the simpler puzzles. And they're it's not extremely often that I'll decide I want to do a second draft because I'm just not satisfied with the first one. It happens occasionally, but not very often. Often when a puzzle goes through multiple drafts, it's because, well, actually, yeah, I'm going to go back on that a little bit. There have been a fair number of times where I've set the puzzle, but then realised that a bit of logic that I had used while setting it wasn't as sound as I thought it was. And in those cases, I will tend to resolve the puzzle bearing in mind what I've now realised, and like sometimes I'll be okay with it as it is and just leave it as it is because it turns out that it's still unique and solvable and not a particularly bad deduction. Other times I'll be able to model my way through to finding a new solve path, but it's just nowhere near as nice as what I had originally had in mind, in which case I will go back and redraft it. But yeah, so I guess redrafting isn't kind of a standard part of my process. If a puzzle is good, if a puzzle I'm happy with it the first time, then I'll stick with that. So I don't expect to go through multiple phases of refinement unless I find that it's necessary, either because a step wasn't how I thought it was, or because it turns out to actually be broken, or something like that.
Right.
But yeah, there have been with some of the more complex puzzles, there have been sort of half drafts where I've explored the idea up to a point and tried to set a puzzle, then realized that then stumbled across something new where it's like, actually, I prefer that to be the break in, or just realized a bit of logic that makes the whole thing make a lot more sense. So I'll then start again from scratch in order to properly make use of that rather than trying to adapt the current version.
Right. Do you find yourself setting in long chunks of continuous time, or come at the problem bit by bit over a longer time period?
Usually I'll do it in fairly long chunks.
Makes sense. How often do you use the computer solver when setting a puzzle?
I do make a fair amount of use of it. What has ended up becoming the my method on quite a few of my recent puzzles, though, is I will have the puzzle ongoing in two windows, where one is in Pemper, and so I'm building it without the computer's help and trying to figure out the process as I go along, and in the other, I have it in FPuzzle's True Candidates on, which is mostly there as a way to make sure I haven't completely broken the puzzle without noticing.
Right.
But also I find that like occasionally I will be unsure where I want to put the next clue, so I'll kind of look at the true candidates and see what areas are restricted, or try digits and see what happens, and then when I find something that's particularly powerful, I'll then go back to the Pemper and see what I can do with that.
Right. Makes sense. Very exploratory style. What is a question you want to be asked, and what's the answer to that question?
Oh. That's a tricky one. Honestly, nothing's coming to mind.
Fair enough. We have a few rapid fire questions, so just answer one or the other as fast as you can. If it's a tie, I mean, just say tie. Local or global deductions?
Global.
Coloring or good living?
Colouring.
Geometry or arithmetic?
Geometry.
For setting Penpa or F puzzles?
Pemper.
For solving Penpa, F puzzles, or CTC?
CTC.
Sudoku or pencil puzzles?
Sudoku.
Chaos or order?
Order.
Interesting. Cages or lines or dots?
Lines.
To disambiguate the end of the puzzle, a given or a clue?
A clue.
Outside or inside clues?
Inside.
Philip Newman asked favorite pair of colors for parody coloring, which I thought was fun.
I tend to use green and purple if it's not like specifically high or low. In which case I'd always use orange and blue.
I see. You use blue for the low ones?
Yes.
Okay. Typical Simon, you know.
Yep.
Uh, an odd even. Green and purple, or
Actually, I often I'll often use orange and blue for parity as well, the usual convention. But if something's ambiguous, I'll start in green and purple and then switch to orange and blue once I know.
right. That's a good thing to do. I like doing that as well. um, what's the most Jay Dyer like puzzle that you've made? Like, what puzzle sort of encapsulates the style of your setting?
Oh, maybe overkill. It's a tricky question, but that's the one that comes to mind.
Well, overkill. Okay.
Yes, overkill, not overfull.
There's too many over.
It's on the near the top.
Is it the first page? Oh yeah,
Yes.
it's the first page, of course. I've noticed that your right, this is the Doppler killer, right? Your LMD page sort of like, I feel like it was going faster at the beginning, like you were publishing puzzles more often. That might just be like recency bias or something, but it seems like recently you've been taking more time to release puzzles. Is there a reason for that?
It's partly because there was one occasion where I published 2 puzzles within a day of each other, and someone commented saying, "Aren't you worried that the previous one isn't going to get any attention?" And I thought, yeah, that's a fair point. And it's partly because it's I'm a natural procrastinator, and that habit has settled in a bit more recently. So it's as much as anything that. Like I've got a fair backlog of puzzles that I want to publish at the moment, and should get around to putting a few of them up there.
Right. Candy asked a while ago for a different setter, but I think this is an interesting question for anyone. For someone that is set as much as you have, this is directed at Grockles, by the way, but you've set a lot of puzzles on your own. Does the initial quote unquote wonder that came with setting still exist for you? And if it's still there, how has it changed over time?
There was actually a period a few months into setting where I started to it started to feel a bit like it was drying up, like I had a few good ideas for puzzles and made them and just wasn't thinking of much more. But I mean, well, all that happened was that I just my writer's block cleared and I started having ideas again and started enjoying it again. So it was kind of went through a brief dip like that. But once I sort of got past that feeling of there are only a few ideas and I've had them, it's kind of I've been enjoying a lot more exploring the vast array of ideas that are still out there. So it's kind of got into a rather stable state of enjoyment, I guess.
Right. I think you said do you set every night still? Or nearly every night?
Most nights I will be playing around with something. Often it's just a little idea that doesn't really go anywhere, but yeah, it's quite often a feature of my evening.
Or my
work day if there's a particularly boring meeting going on.
Yeah. fair enough. Do you still watch CTC regularly?
Fairly regularly. Not as much as I used to, but I make sure to at least check and see what the video is each day, and will often then also watch it, like to
Right.
keep up with what's going on.
Do you have a preference, Simon and Mark?
Um, I definitely watch a lot more of Simon's videos than Mark's. I'm I'm not sure I could say why. I'm not sure I'd want to, but just that's when I first encountered the channel. Actually, as I'm saying this, I now realise that they, like it says right at the beginning of the video, that there were two of them. But for a while, it didn't really click that it wasn't just Simon, because it was just Simon's videos that were coming up on YouTube. But yeah, it's so as much as anything, it's kind of I found Simon first and have just kind of stuck with that habit. And I guess there's also the fact that Mark's videos come out a lot later in the evening, so it's kind of when Simon's videos come out, I can often then just watch it then, as
Right.
opposed to when I'm going to bed.
For a while, they were calling Mark's video the bonus video, uh, and I think that made me stray away from Mark's videos a little bit more for some reason. I don't know why. It just, oh, the bonus video. It's just watch it and if you want to, sort of thing. But they stopped doing that, and it's good that they have. uh, well, that's
I would like to see Mark solving one of mine sometime, because it's always been Simon that solved my puzzles when they've been featured. Be nice just to just for the for the variation as much as anything. And a bit more.
yeah. I had a lovely experience just the other week of Mark completely demolishing a puzzle of mine in 12 minutes or something. It was beautiful to watch.
Yep.
Simon never does a puzzle in 12 minutes. uh, well, that's pretty much all of our time. It's 2 o'clock. Well, I need to stop saying that. It's not 2 o'clock for everyone in the world. It has been 2 hours. So that brings us to the end of our time. Temporarily challenged, yes. Thank you so much, Jay Dyer. This has been a pleasure to hear your thoughts. Thank you for everyone who has been watching. Sorry, what was that?
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, yeah. It's my pleasure. Yeah, we have a new Patreon supporter, which I just saw in the yes. So ThoughtBite just pledged some amount. I'm not going to say it out loud, obviously. So we have a new Patreon supporter. So if you're interested, support us on Patreon. Subscribe to the channel. We're almost at 500 subscribers. We're at 777, I want to say, maybe 76. We got a little bump from the CTC feature, so perhaps we will make it to 500. But if not, I keep forgetting to get the previous setter to announce the next setter, which has been a plan of mine to do, but I keep forgetting, and I haven't told you who it will be. So I'll type it in the chat, and then you can announce it.
You've picked one who I always worry about getting the pronunciation wrong, but it's the Kojito.
No.
So I hope I've got that right, and feel free to provide corrections.
Did you say the name? Sorry.
The Kojito, yes, I did say it.
Okay,
As I
I
said,
must have missed that.
hope I got the pronunciation right. Not the
Yes,
intended pronunciation.
the next setter will be the. Now I'm worried I'm going to mispronounce it. But I think some people say cogito, cogito. It's not Kagisho, as I originally thought it was. But yeah, you know what I'm saying.
Yep.
One of our moderators, the Kagisho. So he will be next up, and then perhaps the week after we will have a 500 sub special. I don't know. Maybe not. We'll see. But anyway, thank you, Jay, so much. Thank you to the audience, and have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thank you.